Why you feel stuck while everyone moves on. Carl Jung observed that what looks like standing still is very often the psyche gathering its whole weight before it can take a single honest step forward. Here is the premise, and I want you to sit with it before anything else. Jung leaned often on a line from Goethe's Faust, a book he quoted more than almost any other. "Two souls, alas, dwell within my breast." That is the line, spoken by a man torn between the pull of the earth and the pull of the spirit. And Jung would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The tearing is not a malfunction. The tearing is the whole plot. You were never promised one clean desire. You were built with at least two. And the ache you call stuck is not a broken gear. It is two souls straining in opposite directions, and neither one letting go. That is not weakness. That is the architecture of every deep and serious life. And it is worth saying plainly that this architecture was never meant to be dismantled by willpower alone. It was meant to be lived inside, the way you live inside a house, with rooms you have not yet entered. So let's name your private defeat gently, because you are not the only one who feels it. You scroll, and you see the friend who left the marriage, and already looks lighter, the co-worker who took the leap, and already has the new title, the sibling who grieved and already laughs easily again. And something in your chest tightens and asks, what is wrong with me? Why am I still circling the same three feelings at 2 in the morning? And I want to tell you plainly, before we go one step further, there is nothing wrong with you, there is something unfinished within you, and unfinished is not the same as broken. So let's do something with that right now. 3 lines, first person, present tense. Say them quietly in your own voice. I am not frozen because I am weak. I am frozen because 2 true things in me have not yet agreed on how to move. I am willing to hold both without forcing either to win. And here is the last line, the one we always end on. Say it with me. I make the unconscious conscious. And again, I make the unconscious conscious. Before the first key, one small thing. If this way of thinking is new to you, subscribe so that tomorrow's teaching finds you the way this one did. And if something in what I just said landed somewhere quiet in you, type the 2 words, face it, just those 2 words, down in the comments. Let it be a small seal on what you already know and have not yet said out loud. The first key is this. Stuck is not a verdict handed down about your character. It is the sound 2 opposing truths make when they are gripping the same rope and neither one is willing to lose. Picture it plainly. One voice says stay. This marriage still has love in it somewhere. This job still has meaning buried under the fatigue. And another voice says go. You have outgrown this room. You have outgrown this version of yourself. Both voices speak at once, and you stand exactly between them, feeling nothing but the strain. And here is what almost no one tells you. The strain is not a sign something has gone wrong with you. It is a sign both voices are telling the truth. A rope only pulls this tight when there is real weight on both ends. If one side were lying, you would have let go months ago. So the very intensity of your stuckness is quiet evidence of how much is actually true on each side. Jung wrote that the greatest and most important problems of life can never be solved, but only outgrown. From Collected Works 13, notice the word he chose. Not solved. Outgrown. That word changes everything about how you should relate to your stuckness tonight. Because if it could be solved, you would already have solved it. You are not lazy. You have turned this over at 2 in the morning more times than you can count, and it has not moved. And that is not proof you are failing. It is proof you are facing something never built to be solved the way you solve an equation. Think of an ordinary Tuesday. Someone gets up, makes coffee, drives to work, answers emails, cooks dinner, and underneath every small competent task, the same 2 sentences run quietly beneath the floorboards. Stay, go, stay, go. The day never gives them room to finish that argument. So by evening, they feel exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with the tasks themselves, and they call it something being wrong with them, when really, 2 true parts of them carried on an entire argument all day beneath a surface that looked, from outside, like nothing was happening. A problem like this is not cracked open by a clever answer. It is lived with, carried, turned toward the light again and again, until slowly, without a single dramatic breakthrough, you find you have grown a little larger than the problem itself. The problem does not shrink, you do, and the day it no longer fits inside your chest the way it used to, people will say you have moved on, but you will know the truth. You did not solve it, you outgrew it, and outgrowing has no fixed calendar. It arrives on its own slow clock, the same clock that turns a sapling into a tree without anyone watching it move. I am not solving this. I am becoming large enough to carry it. The second key is this. Everyone who looks like they have moved on has simply agreed to stop listening to one of their two voices, and that agreement can look, from the outside, exactly like peace. Watch the friend who left the marriage and already looks lighter. Watch closely. And often what you are seeing is not resolution, it is amputation. One voice has been declared the winner, and the other has been locked in a room and told to be quiet. And locked rooms are quiet for a while. That is what makes them so convincing from a distance. The co-worker with the new title has silenced the voice that whispered, "Maybe this was never really what I wanted." The sibling who laughs easily again has silenced the voice that still aches at 4 in the afternoon for no reason anyone can name. Imagine a man who left his old career 8 months ago, and by every outward measure he has arrived. He runs at sunrise, he sounds certain in meetings, he tells a friend over lunch he has never felt more like himself, and every one of those moments is true. And none of it is the whole story, because alone in his car each afternoon, for a few quiet minutes, a different voice surfaces, missing the old title, the old colleagues, the old sense of being needed. And he does not sit with it. He turns up the radio, he checks his phone, he lets it pass unexamined, and by the next meeting, he is fully the man who moved on again. The same 4 minutes visit him at 11 at night when the house goes quiet, and again in the flat hour after a party ends. Each time he answers the voice the same way, with noise, with motion, with anything but stillness. This is not deception toward you. He may not even know the voice is still speaking. He has simply gotten very good, very fast, at not listening. Sometimes a person must choose a side just to keep functioning. But do not mistake his silence for your answer, because a silenced voice does not disappear, it goes underground. And what goes underground waits. Jung spent his working life studying what happens to the parts of us shown the door, and what he found is that they do not leave the house, they move into the basement. And sooner or later, the basement makes itself known, in a restlessness with no object, in a marriage that turns cold, in a temper that flares over a dropped cup, because the real charge was never about the cup. So when you compare your open struggle to his closed certainty, you are comparing your whole truth to his half of one. His moved on may only be postponed. Wearing the clothes of an ending while the story underneath is still unwritten, I am not comparing my whole truth to someone else's silenced half. The third key is this. Growth was never a solution arriving from outside to end your conflict. It is a wider vessel slowly forming around the very conflict that will not end. This is one of the harder ideas to sit with. Because we have all been trained to expect resolution, we want the moment where the tension snaps and the right answer stands there obvious and gleaming. But that is not how Jung watched it happen in the people he sat with for decades. What he watched instead was something quieter and slower. A person would come to him gripped by an impossible choice, stay or leave, speak or stay silent, hold on or let go, and Jung would not race them toward an answer. He understood that racing toward an answer, at that stage, almost always meant one side of the person forcing a premature victory over the other, and a premature victory, he saw again and again, does not actually end the war, it only drives it underground, where it resurfaces, later wearing a different face. So instead, he waited with them. He let both sides keep speaking, the stay and the go, the yes and the no, held together without either one collapsing the other. And here is what he found happens. If you can bear that discomfort long enough, something new begins to form. not chosen by the ego, not willed into being by effort, but grown, the way a vessel widens around whatever is placed inside it. He called this the transcendent function, the emergence of a third position that neither side saw coming, not a compromise between the two, not a splitting of the difference, but a genuinely new standpoint that honors what was true in both voices at once. Think of what compromise usually feels like. Compromise is two tired negotiators splitting a sum neither one wanted to split. Half a marriage, half a career, half a self. And it satisfies no one because it was built on subtraction. The third position Jung described is not built on subtraction at all. It is built on addition. It does not ask you to want less. It asks you to see more. It is the difference between cutting a disputed field in half and discovering, after long enough looking, that the field was never the real question. The real question was what kind of life the two people standing in it were actually trying to build. This is why the timeline of it cannot be forced. A vessel that is stretched faster than its material allows simply cracks, and a person forced into resolution before they are ready does not integrate, they fracture, and the fracture shows up later as bitterness, as a decision that never quite settles, as a piece that never quite convinces even the person who made it. Imagine two people you might know without ever naming them. One who left a relationship the week the doubt first appeared, quick, decisive, admired by friends for having such clarity, and years later, still quietly wondering, in unguarded moments, whether they left too soon, whether the doubt had been a phase, not a verdict, and another who stayed in the very same kind of tension far longer than anyone thought reasonable, who was gently teased for taking so long to decide anything, and who eventually arrived, not at the answer anyone expected, but at a third way of living the question that neither the stay crowd nor the go crowd had ever suggested to them. The second path looked, for a long while, exactly like failure, and it was never that. It was a vessel widening in the dark. So if you are still standing in the tension tonight, unresolved, uncomfortable, no clean answer in sight, consider the possibility that you are not failing to grow. You are in the exact middle of it. The seed has cracked, the widening has begun, and it does not look like triumph while it is happening. It looks like exactly what you are feeling right now. I am not waiting for an answer to arrive. I am widening around the question itself. The fourth key is this. The comparison that is wearing you down is a single photograph mistaken for a whole story. You see one frame, the friend at the party laughing, the co-worker announcing the new job, the sibling posting the sunset with a caption about gratitude, and your mind, which is very fast and not always very kind, takes that one frame and builds an entire finished narrative around it. They have arrived, and I have not. But a photograph was never built to hold a whole life. It holds 1 second, chosen, often quite carefully, from among thousands of other seconds that never made it into frame. The same friend was awake at 3 that same morning, with a familiar dread sitting on their chest. The same co-worker sat in their car in the parking garage for 20 extra minutes before they could make themselves walk in and perform certainty. The same sibling wrote and deleted 3 different captions before choosing the one that sounded most like peace. None of that is a photograph. All of it is real. This is not cynicism about other people's joy. Their joy may be entirely genuine. It is simply an honest reminder that a photograph, by its very nature, cannot show you the whole reel, and you are comparing your entire unedited footage, every take, every stumble, every 3 in the morning thought, against their single chosen frame. That is not a fair fight. It was never going to feel fair, because it is not. Think about your own camera roll for a moment. The pictures you yourself have posted. The one from the trip where you looked at peace. The one from the dinner where everyone was laughing. Now think about what stood just outside the edges of each of those frames. The argument in the car on the way there. The worry you were carrying about something entirely unrelated. The ordinary tiredness that never makes it into a caption. You already know, from your own life, that a photograph edits. You simply forget to extend that same mercy to everyone else's photographs when your chest is tight and your judgment is quick. Jung. In a letter written in 1945 to someone who had written to him, utterly crushed by their own unresolved conflict, told them plainly that the very fact the tension had not resolved, that they were still wrestling honestly instead of pretending it was settled, was itself, in his words, proof of the rightness of your life. Read that again slowly. Not proof that something has gone wrong, proof of rightness. The honest wrestling is the evidence of a life being lived at real depth, not the evidence of a life falling behind. So tonight, when the photograph appears on your screen and your chest tightens, try saying this instead. I am seeing one frame. I am living the whole reel, and the whole reel is allowed to still be unfinished. If what I am teaching tonight is starting to feel like it was written for you, stay close. The next teaching will keep building on exactly this ground. The fifth key is this, and I want you to be patient with me here, because this is the deepest key, and it does not unfold in one motion, it unfolds in pieces, so let's take them one at a time. First, consider what it actually means to hold attention rather than resolve one. Most of us were never shown how. We were taught, quietly, from childhood, that a feeling in conflict is a problem to be fixed immediately, that ambivalence is a flaw in character. So the moment two truths appear in us at once, we panic, and the panic drives us to force a resolution before we are ready. We choose too fast, or we numb ourselves so we do not have to choose at all. Jung's whole clinical life pushed against that habit. He watched patient after patient force a premature ending, and watched it fail them later, sometimes years later, in ways that cost far more than the original discomfort would have. So the first piece of this key is simply permission. You are allowed to not know yet. You are allowed to stand in the middle without treating the middle as a failure. Say that to yourself now, slowly. I am allowed to not know yet. Notice how unfamiliar those words feel in your mouth. Second, consider what actually happens inside the psyche while you are standing there. It feels like empty waiting from the ego's chair. But Jung, drawing on imagery he studied through an old Chinese text called The Secret of the Golden Flower, a meditation manual he came to through his colleague Richard Wilhelm, noted a turning point that appears again and again in these accounts. A moment where the person stops fighting to force one side to win and simply turns attention toward the whole conflict itself, holding it, watching it, without picking a side. And it is precisely at that moment, not before, not by force, that something shifts, not because the person willed the shift, but because sustained attention is what allows the deeper psyche to do its slow work. Think of it like sediment, settling in water. You stop shaking. You cannot make the water clear by staring harder or stirring faster. You can only stop disturbing it and let stillness do what stillness does. The shift comes from steadiness, not from force. Let me make this ordinary for a moment. Imagine someone standing at the kitchen sink at 11 at night, dishes done an hour ago, phone face down on the counter, turning over the same two sentences they have turned over for months. I should stay. I should go. And their habit, every night, is to grab for an answer before bed. They scroll for advice, or call a friend to be told what to do, or force themselves to feel settled by sheer will. And for an hour it works. And by 2 in the morning, the other voice is awake again, whispering the thing they silenced. And the cycle starts over. That person is not failing. That person is shaking the water every single night without knowing it. The exercise is smaller than it sounds. One evening, stand at that same sink, and instead of reaching for the phone or the forced calm, let both sentences sit there together, unresolved, for 5 quiet minutes. No verdict, just witnessed. That is the whole practice. And it will feel like nothing is happening. And something will be happening. Do it again the next night if the first feels like nothing. The water does not clear on the first stillness. It clears on the accumulation of stillnesses, none of them dramatic on their own. Third, consider what this means for the specific ache you feel, watching everyone else move on. If the shift only comes through sustained, Then every time you compare your pace to theirs and force your own resolution early just to catch up, you are doing the one thing guaranteed to delay what you want. You are shaking the water. Imagine someone standing over a pot, insisting it boil faster because the neighbor's pot is already steaming. The heat does not care about the neighbors, and neither does the psyche. This does not mean give up watching for movement. It means stop mistaking the absence of visible movement for the absence of real movement. The sediment is still settling, even on the days it looks murkiest, even on the night at the sink when nothing seemed to change, even on the week you cried for no clear reason and thought surely this means I am going backward. Sediment does not settle in a straight line, it settles in swirls, and a swirl caught mid-motion always looks like chaos to the eye that is watching too closely. Fourth, and here is where the key turns fully, notice that both of your inner voices, the one that says stay and the one that says go, are not enemies fighting for a single throne. They are both partial truths, each carrying a piece of you that matters. The third position, when it finally emerges, rarely erases either voice. It usually honors something real in both. This is why forcing an early winner costs you later, because you do not just silence a preference, you silence a piece of yourself that had something true to say, and that piece does not vanish. We already spoke of the basement it goes to, so the patience this key asks of you is not passive waiting, it is active holding, the discipline of letting both voices keep speaking honestly, even while the world insists you should have an answer by now, and even while your own tired mind insists the sink, the pot, the 2 in the morning silence has gone on long enough. This active holding has a cost. It costs you the comfort of certainty, the relief of a tidy story to tell at dinner parties, the ease of simply picking a side and letting the rest go quiet. But weigh that against the other cost, a basement that fills up unexamined for years and finally floods the house at the worst possible hour. I am not forcing a winner. I am holding both voices until the third one is ready to speak. The sixth key is this. Your stuckness was never a diagnosis. It was a threshold you have been standing on longer than you expected. Thresholds do not announce themselves with fireworks. They are quiet places. You stand in them far longer than feels reasonable, and then one day, without any dramatic sign, you notice you are simply somewhere else. Picture someone standing in their own kitchen at 11 at night, coat still on, keys still in hand, unable to say even to themselves where they have just come from. They are between the hallway that leads to bed and the door that leads back out, and they stay there for several minutes doing nothing at all. From the outside, this looks like nothing. From the outside, it looks exactly like stuck, but it is a threshold quietly doing its work. The body has not moved because the psyche has not finished its slow negotiation between the voice that says settle and the voice that says there is still further to go. That same 1945 letter Jung wrote, naming an unresolved conflict as proof of the rightness of a life, was written to someone who felt crushed, certain that everyone else had found peace while they alone remained caught. And Jung did not tell them to hurry. He told them, in effect, that the wrestling itself was the sign of a life being taken seriously, not a life falling short. That reframes the whole shape of what you have been calling failure. You have not been failing to move on. You have been refusing to silence half of yourself simply to look finished on time. Notice, too, that the person in the kitchen does eventually move, not because they forced an answer, but because standing there long enough, honestly enough, is itself what finally lets the next small step arrive. It rarely comes as a thunderclap. It comes as a small, almost boring certainty. The coat comes off, the hand reaches for the door, and no one could name the exact moment the decision was made, because there was no single moment, only enough stillness gathered for the next step to feel obvious instead of forced. So tonight, if you are standing exactly where you stood last year, watching other people's photographs and feeling the old tightening in your chest, let this be the thought you carry instead. I am not stuck. I am standing at a threshold that has not finished forming its doorway, and thresholds are crossed quietly, almost always after the watching has stopped. I am standing at a threshold, not stuck in a verdict. Here is the whole picture. Stuck is not a verdict. It is two true voices gripping one rope. Everyone who looks moved on has simply quieted one of their own voices. Growth is a vessel widening slowly around the very conflict that will not resolve. The comparison wearing you down is one photograph mistaken for a whole reel. The patience this asks for is active holding, not passive waiting. Sediment settles only in water you stop shaking, and your stuckness was never a diagnosis. It was a threshold quietly finishing its doorway. And if I could gather every one of these into a single recognition, it would be this. You were never behind anyone. You were simply refusing to fake an ending you had not actually reached. And that refusal, uncomfortable as it is tonight, is the same honesty that will let whatever comes next actually hold. I am not frozen because I am weak. I am carrying two true things that have not yet found their third. I make the unconscious conscious, and again, I make the unconscious conscious. So the next time you feel stuck while everyone else appears to be moving on, ask yourself gently, not what is wrong with me, but what threshold is quietly still forming beneath my feet.